Before we start, a quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. Only 4% of my channel is subscribed. When it reaches 1,000 subscribers, I will release a special video.
The world was a shadow of its former self, a canvas of destruction painted by the ruthless hand of Allrad. Crumbling buildings stood like tombstones marking the death of a civilization, their hollow eyes, broken windows and doors, gazing out onto streets littered with debris and the remnants of life now gone. The air was thick with the stench of burning metal and charred earth, a constant reminder of the recent devastation. In this apocalyptic setting, Richard treaded cautiously through the once bustling market district of what was known as New Haven. His boots crunched on glass and twisted metal, the sounds unnaturally loud in the eerie silence that enveloped the city. Every few steps, he paused, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement, his ears straining to catch any sound above his own careful movements. Richard was a soldier, or at least he had been before the world fell apart. His uniform, once crisp and authoritative, was now tattered and stained with the dust of his fallen world. His face was set in a grim line, his eyes a mirror of the desolation around him, reflecting a mixture of resilience and deep-seated sorrow. As he maneuvered through a particularly narrow alley, his hand rested on the hilt of his combat knife, a meager but necessary comfort. The threat of Allrad's drones was ever present, their patrols random but frequent, their sensors keen to pick up any unauthorized presence. Suddenly, a slight noise, a soft scuttling, barely perceptible, halted his steps. Richard's body tensed, every muscle coiled like a spring, ready to react. He crouched low, blending into the shadow of a collapsed wall, his breaths shallow and controlled. Peering around the corner, Richard spotted a figure darting through the shadows, its movements fluid and purposeful. It was too small and too fast to be human, he thought. Perhaps a local animal, or worse, a drone scout. He decided to follow, curiosity edging out caution. The figure led him through a maze of destroyed buildings and upturned vehicles, until finally it paused. As Richard drew closer, staying out of sight, he realized that the figure was not a creature of Earth. It stood upright, its posture elegant, its skin shimmering with an ethereal glow. The alien was slender, with elongated limbs and features that spoke of a beauty that was almost otherworldly. He watched in fascination as the alien knelt beside a small, clear pool formed from a recent rain, its hands moving delicately through the water. It was then Richard noticed the subtle, almost imperceptible tremor in the creature's movements, a sign of vulnerability. Before he could step forward or retreat, a sudden burst of light split the air. Drones. They had found them. The alien looked up, its deep blue eyes meeting Richard's in a moment of shared fear. Without thinking, Richard acted. He dashed from his hiding place, grabbing the alien's arm and pulling her with him. "Run!" he hissed, the urgency of the situation lending speed to his legs. Together, they fled through the ruins, the drones buzzing angrily behind them. It was a frenzied chase, one that took them through dangers that were both seen and unseen. Just as they were about to be cornered, Richard found an opening, a hidden underground passage that led to the old subway system, long abandoned and forgotten. They plunged into the darkness together, the alien's slight form trembling beside him. As they navigated the labyrinthine tunnels, Richard felt a strange sense of camaraderie forming between them, born of desperation and the raw instinct to survive. Finally, they emerged into a small chamber, the sounds of the drones fading into the distance. The alien, catching her breath, spoke in a melodic tone that filled the damp air with a haunting quality. "I am Salin," she said, her voice laced with gratitude and a trace of something else. "Hope, perhaps?" Richard nodded, his own breathing ragged from the exertion. "Richard," he replied simply. As they sat in the dim light of the underground hideout, the barriers between them began to dissolve, replaced by the mutual realization that in this new, broken world, trust might be their only way forward. Chapter 2: An Unlikely Ally. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Richard led the way, his steps cautious and measured, navigating through the debris with a familiarity born of necessity. Salin followed, her senses attuned to the subtle vibrations of the building, alert for any sign of instability or unseen threats. As they settled into a shadowed corner of the building, the immediate danger seemed to ebb away with the light of day. Richard pulled a tattered cloth from his bag and laid it on the ground, gesturing for Salin to sit. She did, folding her legs beneath her, her eyes never ceasing their vigilant watch. Richard broke the silence, his voice a low rumble in the quiet. "We can't keep running like this," he said, his gaze meeting hers. "Sooner or later, we'll need a better plan." Salin nodded, her blue skin catching the fading light. "I agree." "True," Richard replied, pulling a small, dented can from his bag. "But maybe we start simple. Share what we know. Teach each other how to survive better. That's groundwork for trust." Curiosity flickered in Salin's eyes. She watched as Richard split the can's contents. Some aged but still edible, beans, between them. "You mean a trade of sorts? Knowledge for knowledge?" "Exactly." Richard handed her a makeshift spoon. "I'll show you how to make traps for Allrad's smaller scouts. You teach me how to sense them like you do." Salin accepted the spoon, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. They ate in silence, the beans barely registering as flavor, but serving as a reminder of life's continuing demands. After they finished, Richard began outlining basic trap mechanisms using small pieces of rubble to demonstrate. Salin was a quick study, her mind sharp and adaptive. Then it was her turn. She explained how her people used vibrations in the air to detect movement, a technique that required deep concentration and sensitivity. Richard tried to mimic her focus, closing his eyes and listening, truly listening to the world around him. The exercise was harder than he anticipated, but Salin's patient guidance showed him the first faint signs of success. As night descended fully, casting long shadows across the ruin's interior, Richard and Salin continued to exchange knowledge. With each lesson, the space between them, once filled with the weight of suspicion, grew smaller, bridged by mutual need and budding respect. "I didn't expect to find anyone I could work with," Richard confessed as they prepared for the night, arranging their scant belongings for quick departure should it become necessary. Especially not from another world. Salin's laugh was soft, almost lost in the darkness. "Nor did I, but perhaps that's what we needed, a perspective as alien as the situation we're in." They settled into an uneasy sleep, the first since their alliance began, each finding surprising comfort in the presence of the other. Their partnership was a fragile thing, like the first green shoot sprouting in a scorched earth, but it was a beginning. In the silence of the ruins, under the watchful gaze of distant stars, a bond forged by survival grew quietly, steadily, into something resembling hope. Chapter 3: Bonds of Survival. The sun's rays struggled to pierce the thick, dust-laden clouds hanging over the ruined city. Richard and Salin moved cautiously through the rubble, their senses alert to every sound and shadow. The partnership they had formed was tenuous, built on necessity rather than trust, but it was enough to keep them moving forward. As they navigated the maze of collapsed buildings and twisted metal, Richard couldn't help but glance at Salin. Her ice-blue skin seemed almost luminous in the dim light, and her eyes, sharp and vigilant, missed nothing. He admired her grace and resilience, traits he had seen in only the best soldiers. Yet she was alien, a being from a world he knew nothing about, and that made him wary. Salin, for her part, found herself observing Richard with equal curiosity. His human features, rugged and weathered by years of hardship, contrasted sharply with the softness she remembered from her own kind. Despite his rough exterior, she sensed a depth of character in him, a silent strength that mirrored her own determination to survive. They reached a relatively intact structure, a crumbling warehouse that offered some semblance of shelter. Richard motioned for Salin to follow him inside, and they entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. The building's high ceilings and broken windows created a surreal landscape of shadows and light. "We'll rest here for a bit," Richard said, breaking the silence. Salin nodded, her eyes scanning the interior. "Agreed." They settled against a wall, the cold concrete pressing against their backs. Richard pulled out a small canteen of water and handed it to Salen. She took it gratefully, sipping sparingly before returning it. "Thank you," she said softly. "It's been a while since I've shared a moment of peace with anyone." Richard nodded, understanding the unspoken weight of her words. "You're not alone in that. It's hard to find allies in this wasteland." Salen looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "My people, we were not always warriors. We valued knowledge, art, and peace. But Allrad forced us to change, to fight for our survival." Richard's expression softened. "I understand. War changes everyone. It takes away what we hold dear and leaves us with nothing but the will to fight." For a moment they sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts. The bond between them, though still fragile, began to strengthen as they shared their stories and their pain. As the day wore on, they decided to explore the warehouse, hoping to find anything useful. Richard's military training kicked in, and he began to instruct Salen on human combat techniques, showing her how to move silently, how to take cover, and how to use makeshift weapons. "Here," he said, handing her a length of pipe. "It might not look like much, but in close quarters it can save your life." Salen took the pipe, mimicking Richard's stance as he demonstrated how to wield it effectively. Despite her initial awkwardness, she quickly adapted, her natural agility and reflexes compensating for her lack of experience with human weapons. "Good," Richard said, nodding in approval. "You're a fast learner." Salen smiled, a rare expression that brightened her alien features. "Thank you. Your techniques are different from ours, but I see their value." In turn, Salen taught Richard some of her own people's methods. She showed him how to use his senses more acutely, how to read the subtle vibrations in the air to detect movement, and how to blend into the environment in ways he had never considered. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Feel the air around you. Every movement, no matter how small, creates a disturbance. Learn to sense it." Richard closed his eyes, focusing on the sensations around him. At first it was difficult, his mind cluttered with thoughts and distractions. But slowly he began to feel it, the faintest whisper of movement, the gentle rustling of debris stirred by a distant breeze. "I feel it," he said, opening his eyes. Salen nodded, satisfied. "It's how we've survived for so long." As evening fell, they returned to their makeshift camp within the warehouse. The day's training and shared experiences had forged a bond between them, one built on mutual respect and the beginnings of trust. "We need to find others," Richard said, breaking the silence. "We can't do this alone. There have to be more survivors out there, both human and alien, who are willing to fight back." Salen agreed. "Yes, alone we are vulnerable. But together we can become something more, a force to be reckoned with." Richard looked at her, his determination mirrored in her eyes. "Tomorrow we start searching. We find allies, we build a resistance, and we take the fight to Allrad." Salen's eyes gleamed with a fierce light. "Together we will prevail." As they settled down to rest, the weight of their mission lay heavy on their shoulders, but so too did the promise of hope. In each other, they had found not just an ally, but a reason to keep fighting, a reason to believe that even in the darkest of times, the bonds of survival could forge the strength needed to reclaim their world. Chapter 4: Seeds of Resistance. Their destination was an underground network of tunnels that Richard had heard whispers about, a place where survivors might be hiding. The entrance was concealed amidst the rubble of a collapsed building, an unassuming fissure that led into the depths of the earth. Richard had spent the last few days gathering intelligence from fleeting interactions with other humans, piecing together the fragments of hope that had brought them here. As they descended into the darkness, Celine's senses heightened. Her alien physiology allowed her to see in the dim light and detect the faintest sounds of movement. She led the way, her steps confident and sure, while Richard followed closely, his grip on his weapon tight and ready. The tunnels were a labyrinthine expanse of narrow passageways and hidden chambers, carved out by survivors seeking refuge from the relentless onslaught above. As they ventured deeper, the sounds of muffled conversations and the flicker of makeshift lanterns became more discernible. The air was thick with tension and palpable fear of discovery. Richard and Celine emerged into a larger cavern, where a group of ragged but determined humans and aliens had gathered. The survivors eyed the newcomers warily, their hands hovering near weapons, their faces etched with the weariness of prolonged hardship. An older man, his face lined with age and worry, stepped forward. His name was Marcus, a former engineer who had taken on the mantle of leadership in this subterranean enclave. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice firm but not unkind. Richard stepped forward, meeting Marcus's gaze. "My name is Richard, and this is Celine. We're here to join the fight against Allrad. We believe that together we stand a better chance." Marcus studied them for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he took in their determined expressions and the aura of competence that surrounded them. "We've heard that before. What makes you any different?" Celine stepped up, her voice calm yet resonant. "We bring skills and knowledge that can help us all survive. Richard is a seasoned soldier, and I possess abilities that can give us an edge. We've already faced all-raid drones together and survived." A murmur rippled through the crowd as they considered her words. The idea of an alliance between human and alien, fighting side by side, was both foreign and hopeful. After a tense silence, Marcus nodded slowly. "All right, we'll give you a chance. But trust is earned here. Show us what you can do." With that, Richard and Celine set about integrating themselves into the community. They demonstrated their skills, teaching the group new survival techniques and combat strategies. Richard organized training sessions, drilling the survivors in guerrilla tactics and defensive maneuvers. His military background proved invaluable as he transformed the ragtag group into a more disciplined and cohesive unit. Celine, with her alien abilities, became a vital asset. She taught them how to harness their senses more effectively, how to detect the subtle signs of approaching danger that even the most advanced technology might miss. Her knowledge of alien technology and her natural agility made her an excellent scout, able to slip past Allrad patrols and gather crucial intelligence. As the days passed, the initial wariness of the survivors gave way to respect and camaraderie. Richard and Celine's dedication and expertise inspired hope in a community that had long been steeped in despair. They began to see them not just as leaders, but as symbols of a united front against a common enemy. One evening, as they gathered around a small fire in the central cavern, Richard and Celine presented a bold plan. They proposed a raid on an Allrad supply depot located on the outskirts of the city. The depot was a vital resource hub for the enemy, stocked with weapons, food, and medical supplies. A successful raid would not only weaken Allrad's hold, but also bolster the resistance with much-needed resources. The plan was met with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. It was dangerous, but the potential rewards were too significant to ignore. Marcus gave his approval, and preparations began in earnest. Richard and Celine led the charge, carefully selecting a team and outlining the strategy. They spent hours going over the details, ensuring everyone knew their roles and the risks involved. The night before the raid, they gathered one last time, a solemn but determined group ready to face the challenge ahead. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the raiding party set out, their hearts steeled for the task. They moved through the ruins with practiced stealth, each step bringing them closer to their target. The depot loomed ahead, heavily guarded and seemingly impregnable. Utilizing the skills and knowledge they had shared, Richard and Celine guided their team through the shadows, bypassing security measures and neutralizing guards with silent precision. The tension was palpable as they infiltrated the depot, every second stretching into an eternity. The moment of truth came when they breached the inner sanctum, securing the precious supplies. The raid was swift and efficient, a testament to their meticulous planning and the trust they had built. As they made their escape, laden with supplies, the group couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. Returning to the tunnels, they were met with cheers and tears of relief. The successful raid had not only provided much-needed resources, but had also ignited a spark of hope. The resistance was growing stronger, and with leaders like Richard and Celine, their chances of overcoming Allrad's tyranny seemed within reach. In the dim light of the cavern, Richard and Celine shared a rare moment of quiet triumph. They had taken the first step towards something greater, planting the seeds of resistance that would one day bloom into a force capable of reclaiming their world. Together, they had proven that unity, forged in the crucible of adversity, could indeed stand against even the most formidable of foes.